Mothers are truly amazing. They raised you, they loved you, and they sometimes went through absolute hell getting you out of the womb. And when you first come into this world, a mother's embrace is often the first you receive. But not all expectant mothers can share this singular moment in life-giving. In fact, some unfortunate women do not survive the birthing process at all. And in some circumstances, neither do their children. So, today we're talking about the unusual phenomenon known as coffin birth. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. After that, leave a comment below and let us know what other ghoulish curiosities you would like to hear about. All right, gird yourself for some upsetting history. Pregnancy can be a terrifying experience for an expectant mother. From placental abruptions and dreaded miscarriages to premature labor and C-sections, the risks associated with childbirth can be harrowing, to say the least. In fact, 1/3 of all births involve a cesarean section operation. C-sections have saved the lives of millions, but the potential side effects are alarming. Infection, shock, profuse bleeding. Even with medical advancements, women who receive cesarean sections are almost 4% more likely to perish during childbirth. And such extremities are not confined to unusual circumstances. Even a normal, healthy pregnancy can be accompanied by intense bodily changes and hormone shifts that are extremely difficult to cope with. The strength of a mother knows no bounds. The United States has over 3 million births a year, but among all that joy, there is tragedy, as over 1,000 women die in childbirth annually. This number seems to fluctuate widely in any given year. For example, in 2021, U.S. childbirth deaths rose by over 60% in just 2 years. Pregnancy is no cakewalk, and there are a multitude of negative outcomes to consider, but none of these childbearing maladies come close to the tragedy of women who die during pregnancy. And though the demise of any pregnant woman is grievous enough, there is one particular occurrence so unusual that it seems too macabre to be true. Though coffin birth sounds more like a black metal band than a legitimate medical emergency, the truth is more terrifying than you might expect. Though you should understand that it's a completely natural occurrence. Put simply, when a pregnant woman passes, sometimes her body will force the fetus out of the womb post-mortem. This complicated process eventually results in a corpse birthing a deceased child. No, this isn't a midnight movie hosted by Joe Bob Briggs. The coffin birth phenomenon is all too real, and is one of the most gruesome and depressing facts about the burial process around the globe. When excavating an ancient tomb, the last thing most archaeologists would expect to find is the skeleton of a fetus half protruding from its mother. But there have been several cases where archaeologists discovered just that, helping us better understand the macabre phenomenon known as coffin birth. Those archaeologists probably could use a vacation. In 2017, scientists announced the discovery of a coffin birth that they were able to date back to the 1300s. The grave was found near the modern city of Genoa, Italy, and bore a startling surprise. Inside the tomb, a mother was buried alongside her children, including an infant believed to have been a coffin birth. Through extensive research, the team of experts concluded that the mother and her child were likely victims of the bubonic plague. When sampled, the corpses were found to hold trace amounts of the disease, still embedded in their DNA. That's one tomb Indiana Jones might skip. If you flip through 100 years or so of preserved medical records, you'll find quite a few haunting accounts of documented coffin births. For instance, one 17th century text has the following quote about a woman found to have delivered after her life ended. April ye 20, 1650 was buried M, the wife of Thomas Topless, who was found delivered of a child after she had lain 2 hours in the grave. Another report from the same century described a woman who had a baby hanging between the thighs 3 days after she perished. These are just a few of the numerous cases on record, and coffin birth occurrences are more frequent than you would probably guess. Unearthed just a year after the bubonic-laden corpses of Genoa, another Italian grave highlighted an even more shocking scene of coffin birth. In what was once the medieval town of Imola, a 13,000-year-old mother was discovered by archaeologists. In the center of the decedent's skull, there was a large hole that had been borne by human hands. This unfortunate woman was the victim of early brain surgery and is believed to have perished during the operation. Sadly for the medieval mother and her unfortunate discoverers, the skeleton of a coffin-birthed fetus was also found between her legs. While coffin birth certainly has a morbid ring to it, the term is a bit too grim for scientists to use. To make things more science-y, experts now use an official phrase to describe coffin birth. Post-mortem fetal extrusion, otherwise known as PFE, is the term the experts use. Occasionally, the E in PFE can also stand for expulsion. And while either instance is interchangeable with the PFE label, expulsion really does paint a garish mental picture. Aren't you glad you clicked this video? The scientific phrasing is much more accurate than the term coffin birth, and this phenomenon can happen to any deceased pregnant woman, regardless of whether or not they are actually in a coffin. And while modern preservation techniques practically eliminate the chances of a coffin birth, not every corpse gets the treatment it needs. One report from a modern case of coffin birth describes a pregnant woman who was found several weeks after she passed. This particular description of PFE is considered one of the most graphic depictions of childbirth horrors ever uncovered. When finally found, the woman's body was bloated, green, and had a half-born fetus protruding from it. The baby was confirmed to have passed at the same moment as the mother. Furthermore, there were no signs of labor before her and her child's demise. The autopsy conducted by experts confirmed that the fetus had been forced out of the deceased mother by the gases building up in the cadaver. That's right, the naturally occurring gas buildup in a decomposing body has enough force to potentially expel the corpse of an infant from the birth canal. The science behind PFE is as messy as the result, but researchers believe they have finally cracked the code. Examples like the gaseous coffin births recently discovered have helped experts figure out why this happens. And it has everything to do with a little bodily process known as putrefaction. Much like the word implies, it's pretty icky. But in layman's terms, putrefaction is what happens to your body after you expire. As our cells begin to decay, they start releasing large amounts of gases as a waste product. These gases can start to build up to the point that they need to find an escape route, which can often cause the body to burst. So no, that's not a beer gut on that cadaver. He's just having a gas. This putrefaction process is now believed to be the source of most occurrences of coffin birth. As the excess gases build and build during the rot of muscle and tissue, this force could theoretically push the baby out of the birth canal to release the pressure. One of the other grisly details about coffin birth is that it is rarely a full-on actual birth. Many PFE fetuses are found only partially extruded from the mother's birth canal. Sometimes it's just the head, while other times the entire top half of the fetus is exposed. Since it's not an actual birth, and is usually only caused by pressurized gases, the whole fetus doesn't have to be released. There just has to be enough room to allow the gases to escape the body cavity. You were warned it was putrid, but you didn't listen. Although coffin birth, or PFE, seems like it would be a source of inspiration for a certain type of creative mind, the phenomenon is almost too upsetting even for horror film and extreme music. Almost. The British horror author Ramsey Campbell wrote an entire novel on the subject in The Doll Who Ate His Mother. Though this cursed coffin birth page-turner is perhaps mostly forgotten, its shocking cover and bizarre plot did inspire one of horror's great icons, Stephen King. King's novella collection Different Season contains 3 novellas widely known, even by those who do not consider themselves horror fans. Ever seen The Shawshank Redemption? How about Stand By Me? Or Apt Pupil? Well, what about the other one where a headless woman gives birth to a living child? What's that? That hasn't been adapted into a movie yet? Well, don't worry, the kid gets adopted. To be more precise, King's coffin birth novella, The Breathing Method, actually details the very real and far more common occurrence of posthumous birth. Unlike coffin birth, posthumous birth means that the children born to deceased mothers survive. Posthumous birth is certainly more explored in works of extreme fiction. From the long-running manga series Berserk to underground horror icon Thomas Ligotti's The Lost Art of Twilight, these examples of posthumous birth are certainly grisly, but even fantasy cannot match the real-world horrors of PFE. So what do you think? What's the most disturbing gravesite phenomenon you've ever heard of? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out these other videos from our weird history.